Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Healthcare India podcast with me, Dr. Vikram Venkateswaran. And we have a very special guest today. He joins us all the way from Silicon Valley. I want you to welcome Haresh Patel, a serial entrepreneur. He started Mercatus and exited Mercatus, and currently he's running Diagnostic MD. But that's not the reason we are speaking to him. We are speaking to him because he did something that I've been encouraging a lot of you to do. That is take charge of your health, and this I also communicated this through my book on your health. But Haresh has done that, and he's coming out with an exciting book, and we're going to discuss that because the title of the book itself is very intriguing for all of us here. So Haresh, first of all, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking time out. I know it's evening for you there, but great to see you here.
Thank you for having me. I was looking forward to having this conversation, Dr. Vikram. So looking forward to it.
Excellent. Now, Harish, let's get right into it. What when we spoke, you said you had lived with unexplained symptoms for over 5 decades. You saw a lot of specialists, and I want to understand what was the first moment when you realized that this was not working. It is just not another doctor you needed to visit, but something deeper.
Well, let me just explain what I had. I had a
Mm-hmm.
rash, and that rash was like 1,000 mosquito bites, and
Mm-hmm.
it happened to be on the joint. It was painful, and there's really only one medical treatment for it, not a cure treatment. So I was on these shots called Xolair, intended originally for asthma patients, and I had to take them every. I was like on a leash because I couldn't administer it anywhere. I tried in Mumbai one time at one of our best hospitals, but it's just the preciseness of the timing of temperature, thawing. I just had to come back to Silicon Valley to Stanford to take that. And it was great because it solved my problem, but I
Mm-hmm.
needed to get more curious. And by the way, this rash actually started off early in my life as we began to excavate my whole story, and we'll talk about that. But it started off in middle school with dandruff, dry elbows, dry knees, um, just eczema. But it was a slow escalation. But it was over the 12 years that I was building Mercatus that we hit. I was called the crescendo of the horror story. That's when I looked like Elephant Man, and there was times where I couldn't go to work. Luckily, that rash stayed below the neck, so most of the time I could go to work. There were a few times I was in a restaurant and I could feel myself puffing up like there's a movie called The Hulk, where he gets angry and when he gets angry, he becomes the Hulk. That was me. And so I didn't want to live that way. And as I got
Mm-hmm.
older, I did everything as a young person. Yeah, take a few symptoms, solve the problem, move on with your career, move on with family. But as I began to get more mature, I was just saying, I don't want to live this way. I've got to figure out
Mm-hmm.
how to take control of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward to I sold Mercatus, and we're in Costa Rica, my wife and I, randomly picked a wellness retreat to kind of detox. And everybody there is talking about an Ayurvedic doctor that was hired there to run the clinic, Dr. Vinod. Dr. Vinod is life changing. He's game changing. He was like, I think how you describe some of our deities.
Mm-hmm.
So I just said, I said, we're this Indian couple in Costa Rica in the middle of a rainforest, and there's an Indian doctor. I said, we should at least meet socially for a cup of coffee or chai. So that's really the goal. But I was also curious about, could he possibly help me? Right? Because I had gone to many doctors, and there was there was no cure. We met socially, and he intrigued my interest around just his curiosity to ask questions, even though it was a social. And I just said, I told Vina, I said, why don't we sign up for his paid program? It was relatively affordable, and that's how we met. And then he gave me an appointment almost 10 days later, but he said, I need you to do something. This is where the pattern starts developing. He said, I don't have the ability to give you a test now, which is what happens in medicine, right? You see the doctor, you get tests. We're at a resort, at a wellness retreat, and you don't want to go back all the way to San Jose, which is the capital. So he ended up giving me an appointment. He said, collect all your records. I learned how hard it was to do that. It was today's a lot easier, so there should be no excuses for anybody to collect their records and have it all together, because doctors need the whole set of records over time. That was kind of aha number one. Aha number two, by the time I saw him, he plotted it out manually. I could then see my own pictures like, wow, this started way back then. You just don't see your own movie, right? Until you put it on a piece of paper. And then I would say the third thing that happened that it was just, Costa Rica is the most diverse, biodiverse country in the world. So just the environment, I met late at night. His office felt like a tree house. Something felt off in terms of I'm entering kind of this interesting sanctuary. And then he asked me, 1 hour was, he gave me 2 hours. That was the other high. You never get that much time with the doctor.
I understand, right.
And so 3 clues: collect your records, plot them over time, spend a lot of time getting to know the person. Those things don't happen. We get 13 minutes with a doctor, at least here in the US. I assume that it's very similar in India because they're just very busy people and they've got a lot of people to treat. So those 3 kind of things struck in my mind. But then first hour, doctor. Second hour, he asked a question that everybody else asked, but just slightly differently. Everybody asked, are you stressed now? Well, I got 3 kids in college and, wife and CEO of a company that goes up and down and nothing out of the ordinary. But he asked a different question. When's the first time in life you were stressed? And he brought me back to middle school, right? If you're all white school, out of 2,000 students, only Indian, funny name, you're going to get picked on. But he didn't settle for that answer. He asked, did you get dandruff back then, right? Because he was correlating that stress with, the skin. But he went back and back, and finally he said, tell me about your emotion levels. And I said, I don't have any. It's a running joke of the family. I can't laugh. I can't cry during moments. I don't understand why that happens. And finally, I said, it's like my mom. My dad used to joke that you're like your mother. He goes, what's your mom? I said, well, she died in a car accident. And then he dug deep. How did she die? Were you in the car? He really, really wanted to know. And just a preamble, my medical diagnosis is always around oxygenation. Apnea or low iron, which obviously carries the oxygen around your blood, or breath along your chest. So just keep that in mind. And finally, he said, did you perform a Hindu rites? Did you, bury? Did you cremate? With all the questions, and he closed his book. He says, I have good news and bad news. Bad news is we can't cure witches. I wasn't surprised because that's what modern medicine was telling me. But he said the good news is that what happened is that your mom's soul never rose. People that die tragically, linger around in your case, she's holding onto you so tightly you can't breathe. It was the same diagnosis from a spiritual angle.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like totally stunned as engineer, living in Silicon Valley, tech entrepreneur. I wasn't really ready to believe it, but it hit me. I would say it split my head open a little bit in Costa Rica. So that was the moment that I would say that the world began to change and spin.
Mm.
And he put me on a journey that I didn't quite believe on. He just said the only way you can release, and he goes, by the way, since you don't express emotion, you're boiling inside. So that's why you have the rash. So if you go to Bodh Gaya, which is in Bihar, and you perform in Dan, your mom's soul will be released and you will be cured. But it took me 3 years before I finally swallowed that and tried it as a last resort. So that's a little bit about that beginning moment around, and that's why my book is written The Ghost in My Body, What 12 Doctors Couldn't See. And it was there in plain sight. They had just dug deeper. And I had done what I think we want your listeners to think about is take control. I was ready to take control of, I don't want to live this way. I can't live this way. I want to get cured. I don't want to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
And technology today allows us to do a better job walking around with our story, because the doctor needs to know the entire story. And part of that story has to be excavated, like you carefully excavate an old temple that's been buried for thousands of years. Sometimes we don't know what's in our head. You got to dig deep. You got to take control. And only when you tell the full story and the doctor's ready to listen to the full story, then you get to a set of options.
So, Haresh, that brings me to an interesting point. I mean, I'm not surprised because I'm spiritual too. But at the same time, as a doctor, we are brought up in a certain way. It's difficult for us to accept, that something like this could be creating the stress in your system. And I don't want to get into technical issues, but causing all the symptoms that you were seeing. And what I understand from you is most doctors try to treat the symptoms, without treating the foundational issue, which was what this Dr. Vinod from Costa Rica, the Ayurvedic doctor in Costa Rica, I handled. So when you say ghost in the body, is it are you referring to blind spots in our healthcare system, or are you talking about something more systemic, which is missing, treating the foundation and not treating the symptoms?
Well, the ghost in my body was my mom from a spiritual perspective. In my last chapter of the book, I do write that she was never a ghost, she was an angel guiding me. I had to go through this journey so I could build this platform to make sure that other people didn't go through the long journey I had to. They can get to something sooner, faster in terms of getting to the bottom of a root cause. Um, so the ghost is also what was buried deep inside me, right? Suppressed my emotions. I didn't cry when I was 6 years old. I buried the memory. We buried the memory. And that guilt grew over time. So that was buried. That's the ghost, right? But the other ghost on the other side, it's a ghost is scary, right? It's scary that doctors don't have the time. They have the compassion, they just don't have the time. The system doesn't allow them to dig deep. And so that's the scary part, is that it was always in plain sight if somebody had just gone and asked the right questions and gone deeper like Dr. Vinod had. And so that to me is the scary part of, and that's why if you look at the book cover, it's a surgeon, which is modern medicine, wearing the glasses where you can see the reflection. And obviously he's ready to operate on somebody, me. And I put a picture of my mom and I on the first morning of arriving in the US. She's actually wearing a white sari, interestingly, all white, which is kind of symbolic of a ghost. It's a real picture. I superimpose it as a reflection in his glass. So it was there in plain sight. But the scary part is the system doesn't allow for diagnosis. And diagnosis starts when you get to root cause. And unless you can address the root cause, you cannot cure people. And therefore, at least in the US, we have 100 million people running around suffering, maybe being treated but not being cured.
No, I totally agree with you. When you said each doctor gives 13 minutes, my estimate in India is each doctor gives about 4 to 5 minutes. So it's the half of what the US doctors give, and that's primarily because of not because of lack of compassion, but because of the crowds that swell up. So, I mean, this is very, very fascinating because we've crossed a line here in a way, right? We're going into things which I call the unknown unknown. We don't know what we don't know about, and it affects all of us in certain way. And I can totally relate to it. I can empathize with you because I lost my mom in 2018. I was much older, uh, but it was a difficult time for me. Probably the most painful experience I've had, and I don't want. Nothing that has happened to me in all my years compares to that time. It took me a long time to get out of it as well. Uh, but coming back to the ghost in the body, you obviously are an engineer. I mean, you're a scientific temperament. I mean, I'm not going to debate that. You used a lot of system thinking into building Mercatus. Now, what are the aspects of those? Primarily, I say this because a lot of our audience are not doctors. They are a lot of them belong to science and they come from backgrounds which are very scientifically oriented. So, what was the thinking that you system thinking that you built, which you used to build Mercatus, that you brought into this aspect of trying to understand what was wrong with you, and based on that, you built this platform. Totally appreciate what your mom did for you, even from the other side, helped you recognize, realize for a higher purpose. But what were uh, some of the thought process on it?
So I think I had to go through this journey. And I also had to go through the entrepreneurial journey with Mercatus. And the two combined is what got to the aha. I think if either one had not happened, we may not be on this podcast to kind of explore how we can solve this time challenge problem, diagnostic challenge. So Mercatus started in 2009. We exited in 2021. So it's a 12-year journey. And we just, I would say, stumbled on becoming a software company. I won't get into the gory details, but what we learned was that investment bankers, which is kind of a morph that we did at the pivot of the business, from sales channel to adding investment banking, is we found our clients could buy the technology, but they couldn't really purchase it because they didn't have financing to become an investment bank. And we learned that, oh my God, it's really hard to take all these documents that go into a financial model that turn into an investment memo. And uh, without all the data, I mean, literally our customers had millions of financial models. Each one said you have to keep that hourglass going on your computer before it opened up. And all the data was locked in. They couldn't make sense out of anything that was going on in their business, their portfolio, and their valuations. And so what we did is we connected those scattered documents. We structured the data. Initially, we used a large team in India to structure. The software technology wasn't there, but then over time it caught up. And then visualization of historical patterns, because you need historical patterns to project in the financial world what's a scenario, right?
Right.
Trump put in tariffs. Today he lowered them, right? What is the impact of that valuation? It took our investors 6, 9, 12 weeks to figure that out, believe it or not. What to do with that decision? And so that was the pattern recognition that we saw, that we actually centralized the data, structured in a way that they could do scenario analysis. Think about medical ourselves. Each one of us have years, if not decades, if we're older, of records that are scattered all over the place, same as financial models. Our financial models are all those tests, all those detailed squiggly lines and sleep patterns and heart patterns, and it's all over the place. It's not centralized. Therefore, when we have a new symptom, if you're only taking a snapshot, you're not going to see the pattern. So I saw the aha moment when I met another Indian doctor, Dr. Reddy, who was in Sacramento, which is hours away, and he spent also 2 hours. And he finally went on the whiteboard. He says, oh, here's these 8 quadrants. I've been systematically asking these questions and filling in these 8 quadrants. Everything you told me about your mom, which I just explained to you, is called the energy quadrant. That's where PTSD resides. That's where trauma resides. That's where grief resides. That's just energy. It's all interconnected. He said, the problem is 12 doctors, 12 specialists, each one reaching behind the curtain, feeling one part of the elephant. I'm going to take the entire curtain off, and because they're all interconnected. And that was about why I was there. My mind went berserk, and I just said, oh my God, I can solve this, because this is exactly Mercatus' architecture. Fragmented data, inability to create a picture, and the only difference is scenario analysis, which is inflation, tariff, recession, whatever it might be. The symptom is just a new situation. And so the light bulb went off that, oh my God, if we can systematize the diagnostic methodology of some of the best holistic functional doctors or integrative medicine doctors, because they a wide aperture, you can build your story. You can carry your story, and everybody should have their story with them. Because what if you land up in the hospital unconscious?
Right.
So it's just the light bulb went off, and I said, I found my passion. I'm going to solve this in technology and help 100 million people here in the US and even more across the globe that are living in similar situations where nobody's connecting the dot. And the biggest connection is mind and body.
Correct. One of the controversial things you've said, which I had read as I was preparing for this discussion, it's controversial because for those of us in allopathy, that is, you're attacking the core of what we've done. You said medical training, it rewards specialization. It does not reward synthesis. I think this is one of the statements you've made online. Now, I totally get it. I mean, luckily, I've been on the IB side too, so I understand what you're saying when you say all these data points are lying scattered, and it's very difficult to come up with a financial model. So, if you had to redesign the system, not redefine, redesign the system, and you had to look at diagnosis, because that's where we mostly go wrong, right? How would you redesign it? I mean, considering we are living in the world of AI, there's intuition, which guides a lot of doctors. You look at a patient and you probably know what's going on. I don't know whether that's good or bad. And a lot of us lead with intuition. We look at a person and we say, okay, this is going to be the core issue. I'm going to go in this direction. So how are you going to redesign it? How are you going to re-architect it? If you just start with diagnosis, because the rest will depend on the diagnosis.
So I'm going to be the first to say that I don't think I can redesign the system. It's just the institution is the institution. And doctors are doing incredible work, saving our lives, right? They're doing God's work. But the apparatus is what it is. But sometimes I don't know. I look at the analogy when I'm sitting on a plane, I look out the window, nothing else to do, and you watch that little luggage cart come, and they have like 20 luggage carts. And I always wonder like how when the guy turns his wheel, how do the other ones turn exactly like the other carts, right? It creates the same shape. What I'm trying to say is that if we can institutionalize diagnostic methodology, that's the front end of it. That's the story.
Right.
If we capture the
Right.
story, then the rest of those little compartments will follow. So I don't think we need to tear down the system,
Mm-hmm.
but the show here in the US, which I don't know how popular it is in India, it's called House MD. And the old man, his title is Chief Diagnostic Officer.
Right.
I challenge anybody, type in how many Chief Diagnostic Officer titles are there in India?
I'd say zero.
Zero.
I've not heard of one.
That's the problem is that you need the specialization. Don't get me wrong, right? But you need to start with the big picture. And what I loved about Dr. Reddy when I met him, I did everything that you do at every other doctor's office, filled out the forms, nurse came and did the vitals, asked why I was there, created a nice folder, put it on his desk. He came in and said, I don't want to look at that folder. I don't want to see, I don't want to know why you're here. I want to know who you are. It's understanding the whole person. And that's the front end of the story. If we can fix diagnosis by creating that specialty, make that show reality. So I'm hoping we do that in technology. And so we're carrying our stories. Hopefully they're well built, and the doctor can, if he's not going to read it, change the doctor. But I think doctors are compassionate. They want to know the whole story. They just don't have time. So how can we, we look at resumes, right, and quickly decide do we want it or not. So if I have a 3-page resume, here's my medical records plotted over time, here's my wearable data plotted over time, and here's my life story plotted over time, and they superimpose, it'll make the conversation a lot richer. So I don't think we can down, but I think we can fix the front end, and if it fix everything else would follow nicely. That's the theory or the thesis.
No, absolutely. And sometimes the solutions, and we have historically seen this in healthcare, where the solutions seem to be fairly simple. The adoption is what creates a problem. The same happened with hand washing and stethoscopes, and I can go on. There's so many examples in medical history where the solution was a very simple solution, but it was so simple that adoption was a challenge. And if Hugh Laurie, I love the role he plays as House MD, for big
You've
mover
seen the
from
show.
Jeeves, right? Yeah, I
Yeah.
love the show. I love all medical shows because it takes me back to a system which I'm very familiar with. And he played Jeeves as well, right? Who was clueless, and then from clueless uh, he goes to House MD. But the follow up question I have is, a lot of people that I work with, they health has an emotional toll. You're not able to get to the solution. I know so many people who are struggling with so many issues. So at what point a lot of them feel this can't be solved. To give you a common statistic, almost 25 to 30% of Indians that I'm aware of are living with some kind of disability, and it could be something as simple as back pain, right? They just accept it and they have this symptomatic relief, but foundationally they're not able to track it. So there's an emotional toll to finding a solution because you will fail many, many, many times before you succeed. So how did that, how did you keep your motivation up? Because at some stage you would have thought maybe there's no cure. We accept what we have.
And I would say I was that person also. We are part of the problem too. It's not just the medical system. We need to get healthy quickly so we can go back to work so we can fend for our family, right? Give them all the things that they need. You want to go back to your hobbies. You want to go back to eating all the good food that you like if you've got some, we're part of the problem, right? And so I would say for 40 of those 55 years, I was the problem. I was also going to a specialist, right?
Right.
But I didn't know any better. Like I said, those patterns have to build over time. I love Steve
Right.
Jobs' quote, right, that he gives at the Stanford commencement address. He goes, "You can only
Right.
connect dots looking in the past."
Right.
So those dots have to happen. And so I paid it, but we're all do the same thing. And I think we also give up. At some point, I just said, I can't live this way. I can't be 4 weeks away. And then, by the way, what happened? I avoided COVID for 2.5 years, but then I
Mm.
finally got it. And then the one treatment that Xolair stopped working was
Mm.
probably the worst time of my life, because you're dealing with COVID symptoms and you're dealing with the rash, and it was just hell, right? And so
Mm.
part of it was I had hit a point of exhaustion and said, this is just isn't going to work. I've got to dig deeper. So it wasn't until I got a good swift kick in the pants that I also said,
Mm.
okay, I have to get to the bottom of it. I also happened to have more resources than the average person, so I could begin to spend the money to dig deeper, right? Um, so it's a multifaceted problem, but it starts with the patient. The patient has to say, I can't live
Mm.
this way. I've got to change. I've got to tell my story, and I've got to find a doctor who's willing to listen to my story and ask those tough questions, right? And dig deeper. That ownership has to start with you're the CEO of your own health,
Absolutely.
right?
That's a great point that you made. But I'm going to get slightly, this might be a difficult question for you, but I still want to ask it. One of the things that when I look at a startup or a company, uh, and I always see that, okay, they usually started because, especially in healthcare, they said somebody in the family had this problem and they said, oh, it's a big problem and let's get into it. And it's very emotional, that whole journey. And most of these, in my experience and my intuition tells me, most of these don't pan out because when emotion meets market reality, and you know that as a startup founder, it doesn't work out. So you have gone from a patient who was finding solutions to his problem to diagnostic MD, which is you're providing the solution now in a way. So, what are the some of the things that you have to guard against? What first of all, what can patients or clinicians expect from this, from diagnostic MD, and then what are these ethical considerations you have to guard against?
So I'll answer the question. You're absolutely right. I've had several people say, "Gosh, don't invest in anybody that's passionate about their own."
Yeah,
But it is, and here I am. I don't know anything about medicine. I can hardly spell MD,
right,
and yet I'm trying to solve a medical problem.
right,
And I had a lot of investors that walked away saying, you're not an investment bank. You're a semiconductor guy, and I'm going to write you a check for $10 million, and you don't know anything about finance. And I said, yeah, but we have an outsider perspective. So sometimes an outsider perspective, in my case, I think outweighs the lack of medical knowledge, right? And but having lived in Silicon Valley, I'll be shameless to say I'm a bit of a greedy capitalist. I want to do that for passion, right? Because I want to, if I can solve one person's journey and make it shorter, I think mission accomplished. But at the same,
hmm,
I want to have good returns on this too. And so I'll be the
right,
first one to say, okay, I want to make this a patient-centered portal. I really want to make it patient-centric. Now, as you said, change is hard. And if I have a
hmm,
fear, is the patient may not want to centralize his records. They may not want,
correct,
take effort. So we're going to find ways to make it easy. But if we don't succeed, I'll be the first one to pivot. Because quite frankly, if you look at our insurance portals here in the US, it just has find a doctor and it just gives who's in their network, which means every patient is going to 12 different people. The insurance company is having to spend money on 12 different doctors, right? The insurance company spend a lot, right? Because most of it was covered by
right,
insurance. So I can pivot the platform to say, okay, Mr. Insurer, don't you want to send somebody to the right doctor sooner, right? This is what you spend on people, right? So your
hmm,
portal, you should be able to use my software to get somebody who's looking for a doctor to add a little bit more intelligence on which doctor to go see.
hmm,
Especially, so I'm happy to adjust and pivot, but right now my passion is around the victims are the doctor, the nurse, and the patient. And so why the nurse and the doctor are patient? Our victims is because they don't have the time. They don't have the time because the system doesn't allow the time, right? And the patient is a victim because Their insurance companies, self-employed and self-insured employers all want to spend the minimum amount of money to get you healthy again, to get back to work. So why I'm passionate about it, I'm happy to flip the business model if we hit a dead end. And I can usually see dead ends before they happen. And go on for about an hour about all the dead ends we hit at Mercatus, how many pivots we made to survive and eventually thrive. And so I'll apply the same thinking here at Mercatus. If it doesn't work, we'll try something different.
Excellent. I mean, I think you handled that tough question very well because uh, when you say doctors are a victim, it's it sometimes feels like a thankless job because you have to succeed every time, and the one time you don't succeed or something happens on your watch, that haunts you forever. And this is true for most of my colleagues who've been doctors over years, irrespective of therapeutic area. And I think nurses, you already know the situation globally. It is even more stressful than doctors. Uh, so I want to kind of come to a happy place. It's like in India, of course, in our philosophy, we say whatever happens, जो हो रहा है अच्छा हो रहा है, जो होगा अच्छा होगा, जो होने वाला है वो भी अच्छा ही होगा. It's the eternal optimism that keeps a civilization like ours alive for all these years. But if hypothetically this situation had not happened, whatever happened to you from middle school all the way till your visit to Costa Rica, which was probably also destined, we won't have a diagnostic MD, we won't have ghost in the body. Do you ever reflect on that? That I went through this, but at the end of it, I mean, and you are fortunate, I'll say. A lot of people go through life without even realizing what's wrong.
Yeah.
But all this that happened to you was probably a little bit of destiny, a little bit of fortune, a little bit of your own initiative. But none of this would have been possible had you not gone through it and, of course, taken it up that I'm going to solve it.
Um, like I said, you have to go through the journey. You have to keep your eyes wide open. In my book, The Ghost in My Body, I talk about stay curious, right? Stay open-minded. And the other message I think that's coming out here is own your own health records.
Yeah,
Share it with everybody, right? And have it ready at any given time. But, you know, it's, at some point, I mean, there's a lot of smart people in the world that are smarter than I am. And somebody else would have completed the journey because diagnosed, like you said, you already said in India, there is no house MD, right? But eventually we all stumble our way through the dark and it'll happen, right? So I'm optimistic that, I'm hoping that we're very successful. I'm praying we're very successful, but there's already a lot of competition. So that's good news. The competition is good. People recognize a problem. I think the difference between the competition, which include, if you look at ChatGPT, Anthropic, all entered this business of centralizing records. That's not a new thing now. All of a sudden, in the last 2 years, there's got 10 or 12 competitors. But everybody is doing the replication of the medical system. They're not connecting the mind and the body. They're also not open to, as you said eloquently, we don't know what we don't know.
correct.
So it's the same replication. Tell me your symptom, I'll give you a treatment. And I think our platform is different because we're just saying, tell us your whole story. Because if you tell us your whole story, you can help yourself have a shorter journey to a cure, not a treatment. So, like I said, in my last chapter, I write a letter to my mom, apologizing for forgetting her, apologizing for burying her, and calling her a ghost. She was an angel. And I said, well, maybe you drove me through this journey so I could help others. And for that, the world will thank you. That's kind of that's my last chapter, is a letter to her. And if we want to end on an optimistic note, I would say, send me all the good karma from India that, we'll be successful.
So, when does the book come out, Haresh?
When was it what?
The book, when does it come out? Or it's
It's
already out?
April 1 on Amazon, and print and in Kindle form. And
Okay.
you can go to my website, hareshpatel.ai, and there you can sign up for kind of a notice that, hey, when it comes out, for sure, we'll definitely let you know. So anybody can contact me through there if they've got any follow-on questions. They can find me there. So April 1 is the
Sure.
release date.
Okay. Interestingly, you chose
Well,
April 1st. There was somebody who I spoke to a few days ago, and they had chosen the date of April 2nd. And I
okay.
said, "What are you trying to consciously avoid? You know, fooling everybody on April 1st?" He said, "No, it's start of a new year, financial year in India, so we decided to do April 2nd."
I
But
might change it now that you think about it. My wife is much more religious and spiritual, so probably picking the right, looking at the
yeah,
stars and having a Vastu person take a look at it, I might change the date for that reason. So thank you for tipping me off.
and I
I
would,
mean,
I would,
I did the hard way. When I bought my first car, not to digress, I called mom and dad, hey, I got my first car, right? This was back when I got my job at Texas Instruments. And my mom had this pause, and I said, well, what's wrong? I could sense from the body language or something. She goes, no, no, it's okay. And and she said, oh, but and I said, no, no, mom, you got to tell me what's wrong. And she goes, oh, you bought an Amavas, right? I mean, no,
mm,
not good luck. And I kind of brushed it off. But then 2 days later, in the parking lot, a big dark cloud rolls over. It rains like crazy, and the entire car is flooded.
wow.
And so I began to believe back then, like, okay, there is something beyond, my straight engineering degree. Go get a job, work for a high tech company.
No, I am a big believer in numerology. I mean, best to ask your wife for various reasons beyond spiritual, because if you don't listen to her and then something happens, she'll say, "I told you so," and she'll keep telling you that. So most of us
Unfortunately,
know how that goes.
I didn't tell her the date. Now, every time we buy the car, we do the puja, we do the swastik, we do the coconut, the four lines in the front of the tree, drive it forward, drive it backwards. So we take care of our cars.
Yeah, yeah, no, I do that too. So it's, I mean, you have to get all the luck you can, right? Especially when you're driving in India. I think we need a lot of divine intervention. But Haresh, it was great talking to you. I think your journey is, when I got into this conversation, obviously I didn't know this aspect, the ghost in the body, and how deeply personal it was for you. I had a sense, but I didn't know this aspect. So it's a big revelation for me. And I think no matter how scientific we get, and I only call this unknown because science has not been able to prove it. That's it.
Yeah.
The minute science proves it, then it becomes scientific again. I mean, it's various things that have happened over the years. So I
It
think
wasn't too long. It wasn't too long ago that we thought the world was flat. We thought there were only
absolutely,
nine.
absolutely.
One my book's epigraph is basically Einstein saying we have to believe in the mysterious. So if you've got the most scientific, brilliant physicist, mathematician saying there is a mysterious world we got to believe, that was really the
Yeah.
thing: is keep an open mind.
No, I agree with you. There's so many things that we don't understand in medicine. I call medicine, I mean, there's so many things that are final frontier. Space might be a final frontier. I think the human body itself is a final frontier because our understanding is very limited, and the possibilities are immense. Things like neurosciences are just starting to evolve. So we have a long way to go. But it was a pleasure talking to you, and
Likewise.
great connecting with you and listening to your story. And thank you for making me a part of this journey. And for those of you who are listening to us, Haresh's book comes out somewhere in April. Now that I have
We might
put
change
any
it
doubts in his mind,
with proper date and time of the release.
you can check out the book on hareshpatel.ai. And uh, definitely watch out for his quotes. He does write a lot. I've been reading them for a while, and the simple message from Haresh and his journey is that take charge of your health. It doesn't matter what the tariffs are today, but you should know what are your triglyceride levels to start with, right? Because that will impact you more. And the awareness, the knowledge, as well as the compute that we have at our disposal is immense today. So Haresh has left us with a very, very simple message, so simple that we will have trouble adopting it. But uh, but the important thing is you have to own your health. like what Haresh said, own your diagnosis. Check out Diagnostic MD if you have time. Definitely check out his book and be in touch with him if you can on his website. So, with that, thank you, Haresh. I'll let you go. I know it's evening for you, and I hope you have a great evening. And looking forward to staying in touch.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.